Hi, my name is Penny, also known as Lethal Lime Reads, and as usual, I'm here to talk about some bookish things. Specifically, today we're going to talk about all the books that I read in July. July for me was all about the Book Junkie Trials and the Reading Rush, and thanks to those two wonderful readathons, I did manage to read 23 books. Now usually in my wrap-ups I go from worst to best, but I think today we're just going to go in the different readathon categories, and we're going to start off with all the books that I didn't actually get to. I had a really ambitious TBR, but about halfway through the month I had to face reality and cut it down a bit. So I didn't get to any of the non-fiction books I was supposed to be reading because firstly I was reading one for a work-related book club. I got about halfway through it and then I gave up. Luckily when I went to the book club discussion I was not the only one who gave up, so that was okay. Then I also had out from the library Reasons to Stay Alive by Matt Haig and The Highly Sensitive Person by somebody. I had to return both of those to the library and I just realized that they're not my priority right now, although I do hope to pick both of those up again in the future. I also wasn't able to read And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. I realized that the audiobook I had out from the library is actually like a radio dramatization, and that's not really what I wanted. I want to listen to the actual story, but my library doesn't have that. So that's a little bit annoying because I do want to read this story, but I know for me I really struggle with classics in physical form. I do a lot better with them when they're audiobooks, so I haven't decided what I'm going to do about that yet. Then also, every month I use a website that I made called the TBR Machine to pick books off my physical TBR shelf and put them on my TBR, and there were two books from that video that I didn't get to. The first one is Texel Juice by Jeff Noon. I just never got around to this. I ran out of time. I almost feel like this book is cursed because I'm pretty sure it's been on my TBR a few times and I never get to it. So that's unfortunate. I will put it back on my physical TBR shelf, but I don't know when we're going to get to it. Then the other book that I chose using the TBR machine was The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett. So I picked this for the challenge to read an intimidating book. Intimidating because of how long it is. Unfortunately, I decided to swap this out for A Heroine of the World by Tanith Lee because I needed something that matched Book Junkie Trials prompt to read a book that's been on your TBR for a long time. And this I just bought recently, so it didn't count. So I put this one on instead. This one, I love the first chapter. I thought it was so beautiful. Unfortunately, after that, nothing happened, and after 60 pages, I decided I'd had enough. I wish that I picked up this instead because I'm sure I'm going to like this one much more. I know much more about this one than this one, so hopefully I can get back to this one at some point soon. I don't know when, but I really want to. So honestly, that was a lot worse than I normally do at reading the books on my TBR. But I did still manage to read 8 books off my TBR shelf. So by the time we take off also that other one that I DNF'd, it's 9 books off. Unfortunately, I also hauled a lot of books last month. So the list is down to 76 books still to read. I think that's gone backwards. And I really do want to get it under 50 this year, so I am possibly after the Newt's going to have to really focus on getting that done. Okay, so now let's talk about the books that I read during the reading rush. Firstly, for a book with purple on the cover, I read Gem and the Holograms Outrageous Annual. This is super short. Unfortunately, it didn't have much substance to it, and I know it's super short, so maybe that was to be expected, but there were only a few bits in this that I actually enjoyed, and I just thought it would be better. Obviously, I've been quite inspired by Gem and the Holograms in my life, so disappointing. Next, I had to read a book while sitting in the same spot all the time, and for that I read Leo the Lop, which is just a cute little children's book where some rabbits learn that different people have different versions of normal. This was a favorite from my childhood along with the other two, which I'll mention very soon. So it was just a fun, nostalgic read. The next prompt was to read a book you meant to read last year. For that, I read The Iron Trial by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare, and this I really ended up enjoying a lot more than I thought it would. This is a middle grade novel about this boy named Callum who's been raised to believe that magicians are not to be trusted. Unfortunately, he gets accepted into mage school, and so he has to kind of go along and discover whether everything he's been taught by his father is true or not. I'm really excited to continue this series now that I've begun it, and I've even put a few tabs in for things that I think are hints of things that are going to come in the future. Then we needed to read an author's first book, and for this I read Red Rising by Pierce Brown. I have conflicted feelings about this. I think I gave it 3 stars in the end, but for most of the book it was looking like a 2-star. It was only at the end that I finally got into things and a character that I actually liked was introduced. So I think I will continue with this series, but I definitely didn't like it as much as other people seem to. This is a science fiction set in this world where you have different classes of people. The reds are the lowest working class, and then you have different colors all the way up to the golds, who are the elites. And we follow this one particular red who ends up infiltrating the golds, pretending to be a gold in an attempt to change the way that society works. It's very Greek mythology inspired, which is an aspect that I liked, but most of it doesn't really feel very science fiction-y. Most of it feels more like a fantasy, and that was a bit weird for me. Anyway, 3 stars, hopeful for the future. Then we had to read a book with a non-human main character, and for that I read Cassandra, which is another one of these children's books. And also the next prompt was to read a book with 5 or more words in the title, and for that I read Little Mouse on the Prairie. So this one follows a cat that is overweight and learns to be happy when this mole helps her to eat more healthily and exercise. This one follows a little mouse who's always teased for working hard all through the summer instead of playing, and the other mice kind of learn the lesson that they should have also been working hard, except there's also a lesson for Tweezle that she should have been having fun. So I guess it's about balance. What I do want to say for all 3 of these books is that all 3 of these books include an aspect of bullying. So Leo the Lop gets bullied because his ears go down, Little Mouse on the Prairie gets bullied for working too hard, and Cassandra gets bullied for being fat. And in none of these books does bullying get called out as like a problem or something that you shouldn't do. Maybe Leo the Lop is like the closest to them learning that they shouldn't have done that, but it's not really questioned that they were bullying Leo the Lop. It's more just that they learn that it's okay that his ears go down. So that was a little bit disappointing in terms of reading these children's books that I had good memories of from when I was a child. But especially Cassandra is very problematic. Like, why did Cassandra have to lose weight in order to be happy? Like, sure, eating healthy and exercising, those are great things, but you can be happy before you do all those things. And other people certainly don't have the right to bully you for being overweight. That's bullshit. Then the last challenge for the reading rush was to read and watch a book to movie adaptation. So for this I listened to the audiobook of Pride and Prejudice, and I watched the movie that has Keira Knightley in it. Now I had previously watched the web series The Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which is based on Pride and Prejudice, and I'm really glad that I had watched that, because I think otherwise I would have really had no idea what was going on. I just really struggle with the writing style in classics, and Jane Austen, I think especially, everyone speaks very weirdly and they talk about things I don't care about. They're very judgmental. It's all about relationships and all this stuff that I don't really follow. But luckily I did kind of follow Pride and Prejudice, so it was fine. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was fine, sure. And again, the movie, I quite liked the romance. I thought they did a really good job in the movie of making Mr. Darcy likable, but there were certainly large portions of it that I thought were just kind of ridiculous. Still, that was 7 books for the reading rush, so I'm very proud to have completed that readathon, even if I have some regrets about forcing myself to read so much. Next, let's talk about the books I read for the Book Junkie Trial. So the Book Junkie Trial had 4 different classes, and for each different class you had to take a different route on the map to get to the Bookie Grail. So I was a mage, so I did that path first, but I tried to do a different class journey every week. And actually it was a lot of fun, because what I did is every week I vlogged going to the equivalent of each of the different locations in real life. And I got to go to some really fun places. So I liked that, and I'm really glad that Rachel Marie put together such a great readathon that really, I think, enabled people's creativity. And I got to read a lot of good books. Also some bad ones, but a lot of good ones. So for the mage journey, firstly we went to Oak Grove where we needed to read a book that was gory or gritty. And for this I read The Cold One by Christopher Pike, which is this paranormal murder mystery. It definitely got quite gory in certain parts. But I will say, while I did quite enjoy the mystery, the paranormal aspect was weird and also the same as he uses in some of his other books. And there was this weird sibling stuff, and even though Christopher Pike was my favorite author when I was a teen, I just think I'm a bit disappointed when it comes to reading him as an adult, even when it's reading what is supposedly one of his adult works. Next we went to Old Pirate Cove or Road, depending on whether you looked at the map or the list. And for this I listened to the audiobook of Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. I recently decided that I'm just going to listen to all the audiobooks for all of Robin Hobb's works, and this is the second trilogy that she wrote. In this one we have these live ships that once 3 generations of the family who owns the ship have died, the ship gains a consciousness and becomes a person, kind of. And the story is all about the different politics that's going on with the families around these ships. It did take me a while to get into it, but I think it's just because there's so much character development going on, and so the characters become very real to you, but it takes a while to get there. So I'm really looking forward to continuing that series, but the first one was just okay for me. Next the mages went to Glimmer where they needed to read a beautiful or colourful book. For this I read The Next Together by Lauren James. I've had this on my TBR shelves for a long time. All I really knew about it going into it is that it is the same couple through different lifetimes meeting again and again, and that is what it is. But each chapter has all 4 timelines, so it was quite slow to get into. And there's this whole bit through it where they're obviously being monitored by someone, some kind of computer system, and nothing really happened with that. So overall, quite disappointing. Also, I mean, I didn't really expect to like this. It's a romance. I thought maybe the science fiction elements would save it, but there were not really any science fiction elements at all. Then on Draconic Isle we needed to read a book with dragons in it. For this I listened to the second book of the Inheritance Cycle, which is Eldest by Christopher Paolini. This is a story about this young boy who discovers a dragon egg and becomes one of the first dragon riders in a really long time, and he's building up to battle against the evil king. And there's dwarves and elves and all the different classic fantasy elements. I don't mind it, it's okay, but it's nothing that I'm really invested in. I think I'm going to continue the series just because I like dragons, and this is a fairly well-known series. Also, I know Christopher Paolini was very young when he started it, so I'm hoping the last book will be killer. You know, that he'll just have learnt so much that that last book will nail it. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I can be hopeful. Then I also read Stardust by Neil Gaiman. If I'm talking about a physical book and I don't have it with me, it's because I've returned it to the library. So this one I've returned to the library. In my TBR I was talking about listening to the audio CD at the same time as reading the book. But in the end I just ran out of time and I just read the book because it was quicker. Because the problem with audio CDs is that you can't play them at like 2 times speed or anything like that. Or at least I don't have the technology to do that. I did also watch the movie for Stardust, and I'm glad that I read the book first. I think if I'd watched the movie first I would have been very disappointed. Also in general I don't think I really like Neil Gaiman's stuff. I've read a few books by him and the only one I've really liked is American Gods, and even that I thought was a bit of a slog to get into. Certainly Neil Gaiman's writing will be something a lot of people love, and I know a lot of people do, but I just don't think it's really for me. There were elements of Stardust though that I did really like. It follows this boy sort of who's becoming a man, I guess, if that's how you want to phrase it, and he goes in to this kind of fairyland across the wall to try and find this fallen star for this girl that he's infatuated from. I thought that the lesson overall was quite good and some of the fantastical elements were amazing. I really loved the dead princes, but overall I just think his writing style's a bit self-indulgent and silly. So then I read the books for the scribe part of the Book Junkie Trials. So this started at Dwarf Mount, where we needed to read a book with a hint of romance, and for this I listened to the audiobook of Storm and Fury. I would say this is a new adult fantasy which focuses on this world where there are shape-shifting gargoyles who protect the world from demons. And there's also, of course, angels. And the main character we follow is half angel, half human. I did really like the representation in terms of her vision issues. She's blind, but obviously most people's understanding of blind is that it means no vision. She's not at that stage, although her vision is deteriorating. I thought that representation was really good, and I thought it was just really fun. I don't tend to like romance, so there were some bits that frustrated me a bit, but it was a fun read, and I didn't mind it. Then for Apothecary Towers, I picked a book at random, blindfolded, off my bookshelves, and for that I picked Scavenger Hunt by Christopher Pike, mainly because I was looking for a short book. So again, this is another Christopher Pike book, but one of his more young adult ones. We follow this group of teenagers who go on a scavenger hunt, but things get very dark and dangerous and paranormal. Again, I thought the paranormal element let the mystery down. I was really enjoying it until we got to that point. Also, as I said in my vlog, 4 pages of this book we're from a different book. So we're reading Scavenger Hunt, then we're in a court case that makes no sense, and then we're reading Scavenger Hunt again. And we missed 4 pages of the actual book we're reading because there's 4 pages of a different book, a different Christopher Pike book, but a different book in the middle of the book. It was very strange. I don't know, I think I need to go back and read some of the Christopher Pike books that I really did love as a teen and see how they compare to my memories, because reading Christopher Pike books that I didn't read as a teen, it's hard to know. Is it just that this one isn't as good as the others, or is it because the books I read as a teen weren't actually any good? Then we went to the Great Library where we needed to pick a book that had been on our TBR shelf forever. For this was the one that I picked for Heroine of the World, but obviously I didn't read that. Instead, I swapped it out for Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Now, for the Book Junkie Trials, you weren't supposed to change your TBR, but I believe that's only for your own team's books, so I think it's okay that I changed the scribe books out. If it's not, like, honestly, I just wasn't reading that book, so luckily, I ended up really liking Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. I know a lot of people really love this series, so I shouldn't have been surprised. Also, I think just having read something when nothing was happening, it was so much better to get into something that was fast-paced and light and funny. So this story follows a young boy who discovers that his father is one of the Greek gods, and he goes along to this camp where all the other kids who are half Greek gods learn about what that means and explore their powers. As I said, I really enjoyed it. It was a quick, fun read, and I really am going to have to continue the series sometime soon. Then next was The Drowning Deep, where we needed to read a book with a lot of world building. Actually, this is a book I forgot to say I didn't read. So I did have for this one Hunter's Oath by Michelle West out from the library, but I just realized that it's too big. I'm never going to get to it. I don't want to start another big epic fantasy series at the moment because I already have too many of them in progress. So I returned it to the library and just calmed my life down, and it was definitely worth it. And instead I picked up a graphic novel because that's nice and easy, and I read the first volume of Descender, which a lot of people have been recommending and saying is great, and they were 100% right. It was beautiful. It made me cry. I loved it, and I'm really excited to continue the series this month. It's a story about humans versus robots, and these big horrible robots came and killed a bunch of humans. The humans decided, maybe robots aren't so great, and culled a bunch of them, and now there's this really awkward conflict between the humans and the robots. I'm so excited to continue, and if you like graphic novels and you like sci-fi and you haven't read that yet, you need to fix that. Then for the bards part of the Book Junkie Trials, the first one was The Elven Guard, and I listened to the audiobook of Blood Witch by Susan Dennard. Now, unfortunately, I've decided to stop with this series. It's just not for me. It seems like it would be, like it's about this epic world and all this political stuff going on in this world where people have these different witch powers. So there's elemental magic, but also like thread witches and truth witches and just some really cool stuff going on, but I just hate the writing style. I just can't do it. I thought that listening to the audiobook might make it better, but it didn't really help. So sadly, I'm done. Then the bards had to go to Hello Isle, where they needed to read a book that was atmospheric or a horror book, but I went with the atmospheric option, and I listened to the audiobook of The Last Magician by Lisa Maxwell. Now, I did like this. Unfortunately, I was just surprised that it was a YA fantasy and not an adult fantasy. I don't know why I got that confused. So I was expecting it to be a lot more in-depth and a lot darker than it was, and I think that kind of set me up not to like it as much as I might have otherwise, because it does include a lot of things that I really like. It's a girl who has the ability to time travel, and she's been sent back in order to try and get this book that will allow the magicians in the future to live with more freedom than what they currently have. I love time travel, and it did do some okay things with time travel, but I just wanted less romance and more cool magic and tricksy plot. So it wasn't bad, but it wasn't what I wanted. Then we went to Empty Barrel Inn, and for this I read Middle Game by Sean M. Maguire. Everyone's been saying how great it was, and I almost wish I hadn't known any of that, because I feel like if I'd gone in completely blind, I would have loved it, but instead I was just like, wow, this is really great. Which, like, I just find it really interesting how much your expectations going into a book affect your actual enjoyment of it. So Middle Game is a story about these children who have been created through alchemy because their creators want to try and gain power over the universe. But mostly the story is just about these two children growing up, discovering their relationship with each other and figuring out how to live. I mean, how to live with their powers, but mostly just figuring out how to live and how to get along with each other. I will say definitely trigger warnings for suicide, because that was extreme, and I think if you went into it not being prepared for that, it could freak you out a bit if that's something that triggers you. But I really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend it, but don't go into it expecting a very plot heavy book. It's more about the relationships and the characters. Lastly, for the bards, we had The Giant Squid, where we needed to read an intimidating book, and for this I doubled up with the Reading Rush challenge, so I listened to Pride and Prejudice, because I honestly have been putting off Pride and Prejudice for so long. So I think just the fact that I've been doing that proves that it is an intimidating book for me. It's just that writing style with that classic writing, well, I really struggle. Then lastly, the outlaw part of the Book Junkie Trials. So I doubled up again and read Cassandra for Crimson Peace, which was to reread a fave. As I said, a little bit disappointing, but she is a beautiful cat, so there's that. Then for the Queendom Stone, we needed to read a book with royalty in it. For that, I picked up Prince of Dogs by Kate Elliott. This is the second book in the Crown of Stars series, which is a 7-book series. It's an epic fantasy with politics and dark magic and war and all that typical epic fantasy stuff. I do find these a bit of a struggle to get through just because they're quite slow, but at least for the last 2 books, by the time I get to the end, I'm totally invested in what's going on. So I am really enjoying this series. I will continue, but I do know that some of the future books get really long, and I know I'm going to have a hard time. There aren't audiobooks for this series, so I don't have that option. I'm just going to have to be brave and push on. And I guess once I get to the end of the series, I'll tell you whether I think it was worth the effort or not. It's kind of the way it goes with big epic fantasies, is you don't really know until the end whether all the different threads are actually going to come together in a satisfying way. Then for the Forgotten Realms or the Forgotten Forest, we needed to read a book that was the next in a series for us. So for me, I read the 3rd book in the Millennium series. It's also the last one I'm going to read. I believe that someone else continued the series after the main author died, but I'm happy with just finishing at 3. That's good. I actually listened to the audiobook rather than reading this because I would never get through this in physical form. But the audiobooks are okay if you listen to them on like 2.5 speed. Because there's just so much detail in these that I think if you tried to pay attention to all the details, your brain would probably explode. In this particular book, Lisbeth Salander, who is this badass woman, computer hacker, but kind of not very socially skilled. She's been accused of murder, and all the other characters are kind of coming together to try and work out what's really going on and help her to get her freedom. I did like this one better than the second one, but I am very glad to be finished with this series. Then lastly, for the Weeping Falls, I read Before I Die by Jenny Downham. So this is a story about a 16-year-old girl with leukemia who is about to die, and she's kind of got this list of things she wants to do before she dies. Obviously this made me cry a lot, but despite that I don't actually think it was that good. Maybe it was just that I'm a bit too adult for it. Perhaps if you read this as a teen you would get a lot out of it and like appreciate your mortality and your life. I don't know, me, it's just really depressing to think about people dying. And I don't think that it was written in a very realistic way. I don't think the characters were very well developed. Anyway, it made me cry, but it was kind of disappointing. Then there was one other book that didn't fit into any of the things I've talked about already, and that is Tilly and the Book Wanderers, which I read sort of for the Step Right Up-a-thon, but I didn't finish it until that readathon had finished, so but I did read it and I did really love it. This is a middle grade book about this girl who discovers that she can go into the pages of a book and be part of a book story, and that there's actually this whole society of people that can do this. This is the beginning of a series, so I'm really interested to see how the series continues. It's just a fun little middle grade book, but I did really like the villain, so I think the author could do some really interesting things with this series. So I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so good luck editing me, getting this down to some kind of realistic length. If you made it to the end of this video, wow, you're amazing. Thank you so much for listening to me for this long. I would love to know if you've read any of the books that I talked about today, and we can talk about them a bit more down in the comments. Otherwise, I really hope that you're having a wonderful day. Thank you again so much for watching, and I will see you next time.